never thought a regular family drive would turn into the moment I realized something heartbreaking. My son didn't really love me. He just loved what I could give him. The second I heard the engine of our car roar away, something inside me went cold. I was sitting on the old porch of an abandoned farmhouse, the wood beneath me rough and splintered. My hands gripped the edge of the bench as I watched my car, get smaller in the distance. Inside it were my wallet, my keys, and every comforting lie I had believed for years. I should have seen it coming. But the worst part wasn't that he took my things. What really hurt was how easily he looked me in the eye and said, "Now. All the inheritance is mine. You can stay here and rest for a while," like he was doing me a favor. Then he drove off like it meant nothing. At first, I didn't cry or scream. I just sat there, stunned. You know that weird calm that hits right after something terrible happens? Like your heart knows what just happened, but your mind hasn't caught up? That's what I felt. I clenched my fists so hard, my nails left little crescent marks in my palms. He thinks I'm weak, I thought. He really has no clue who raised him. The thing about betrayal? It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It shows up in little ways, like when his voice got weirdly sweet, or when he started offering to help me with my finances all the time. Looking back now, all the signs were right there, glowing like warning lights. But I didn't want to see them. I kept seeing the little boy I raised, not the man he had become. As I sat on that porch, I looked out at the open field stretching far and wide. Just weeds, wind, and the creak of an old barn door swinging in. The breeze. No people. No cars. No one to witness how badly I'd been hurt. But I wasn't going to fall apart, not for him. I stood up, slow and shaky, my knees creaking in protest. Every step felt heavy, but there was something new inside me now, a spark I hadn't felt in years. I didn't yell after him. I didn't beg. I just whispered to the wind, "Thank you for showing me the truth." He thought he had taken everything, my money, my security, my pride. But what he didn't understand was that the real treasure wasn't any of that. It was the strength I'd built over a lifetime. It was the grit in my bones, the lessons I'd learned through hard, honest work. As the sun dropped lower in the sky, painting it purple and gold, I let go of the idea that he was my protector. He wasn't. And I wasn't going to sit there, waiting for someone to come back and make it right. Because love without respect? That's not love at all. And right then, in the middle of nowhere, I finally realized, I'd rather be alone than used. I remember a different day, quiet and warm. I was in my kitchen, humming to myself while the smell of chamomile and mint floated up from my tea. The sunlight spilled across the wooden floor, turning it gold. I loved mornings like that. Peaceful. Gentle. Untouched by drama. I was slicing ginger at the counter when my son came in, pretending to help pack a bag. He kept saying I needed a break, that a little trip would be good for me. His voice was soft, too soft. Like syrup covering something rotten. After my husband passed away, he used to sit with me and say things like, "Mom, you don't have to worry. I'll protect everything Dad left behind." His voice was calm, smooth, comforting. And I believed him. I was lost in grief, and he felt like a lighthouse in a storm. But now? I can see it clearly. How he dodged my questions about bank statements. How he got jumpy when I mentioned lawyers or updating my will. I remember the day he asked to be added to my accounts. Said it like he was asking if I needed anything from the store. I was too tired to think straight, still dealing with funeral bills and paperwork. So I just nodded. He liked to sit with me at night, especially after a whiskey or two. He'd lean back and say things like, "I'm the only man left to carry on the family name." Back then, those words made me proud. Now? They make my skin crawl some nights. I still see the look in his eyes, not warm, not loving, but sharp. Like he was always calculating something. There were little signs too. Like the time he accidentally mentioned moving money around, or when he casually talked about selling the house, before I had even thought about it. I told myself I was imagining things. I mean, this was my son. The boy I stayed up with when he had a fever. The one I taught to ride a bike. The same kid who cried into my shoulder when he broke his arm. How could I believe that he'd ever see me as anything other than his mom? But that's the cruel thing about betrayal, it doesn't always come from strangers. It hides behind the people you love most. I'll never forget one night in particular. He was holding a glass of something strong, looking at me over the rim. And he said, "You know, Mom, I'm the only one you can really trust now. Everyone else just wants your money." At the time, I thought he was trying to protect me. Now, I see it for what it really was. He was trying to cut me off from everyone else. He was slowly building a cage, with soft words and fake smiles. All those times he said, "Mom, I got you," they weren't love. They were lies, wrapping tighter and tighter around me like a spider's web. I used to fall asleep thinking I was safe because I had him. Now I know he wasn't my protector. At all. He was the thief who snuck in when I was at my lowest and unlocked every door from the inside. Even now, sitting on this porch with the cold biting through my sweater, every "I love you" from him echoes in my ears like a slap. He doesn't understand yet, that quiet, tired woman he thought he could walk all over? I'm the one who taught him to fight. I'm the one who taught him to stand tall in a storm. And I'm not going down without a fight. When he first brought up the surprise trip, I nearly laughed. We were sitting at the kitchen table. He was tapping his fingers on the wood and smiling way too wide. He said he had something special planned. Something peaceful. Said it was time for us to have a little reset after all the stress. He joked about taking me for a spa day or a picnic. Anything to get me out of that kitchen. I looked right into those eyes I used to trust so easily. Part of me wanted to believe him. I really did. I wanted to grab onto the picture of the sweet son I thought I knew. But something deep in my gut told me not to fall for it. There was this heavy feeling in my chest that just wouldn't go away, no matter how nice he sounded. Still, I said yes. I needed to see just how far he'd go. As we drove out of town, I stared out the window, watching my life slip by one building at a time: the church where I used to sing, the hardware store where my husband joked he'd spend his retirement, the little library where I read books to my boy. Every place we passed felt like it tugged a piece of my heart away. He kept talking about letting go of the past, about how it was time for new beginnings. Then he turned to me with this odd spark in his eyes and said, "It's peaceful out here, isn't it? You always loved the countryside." I didn't answer. I just kept my eyes ahead, but I noticed how tight his grip was on the steering wheel. His knuckles were white. We passed broken fences and empty barns. At one point, I saw a sagging old swing set, half covered in weeds. And for a moment, it felt like I was looking in a mirror. Forgotten. Left to rot. When the car finally stopped, I felt the truth of it all hit me like a heavy, wet blanket. He jumped out, overly cheerful, and opened my door like he was pulling off some grand surprise. "Tada," he said, like he was revealing a luxury vacation. But all I saw was a broken-down farmhouse, barely standing. I stepped out slowly, the dry dirt crunching under my shoes. The air smelled like mold and old hay. He handed me a canvas bag, then, without warning, snatched my wallet and keys from my purse so fast it knocked the breath right out of me. Before I could even ask what was going on, he grinned and said, "Now all the inheritance is mine." Just like that. No sweet lie to soften the blow. Just the ugly truth. As I stepped onto the rickety porch, I felt the wind slip through my sweater like icy fingers. The sound of the car driving away faded into the distance, then, nothing. Just silence. I looked around at the cracked windows, weeds poking through the floor, and doors barely hanging onto their hinges. It didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a test. I clutched the canvas bag tighter and stepped inside. The smell hit me first: musty wood, mildew, and something old and forgotten. I moved carefully, each step echoing through the hollow house. I stopped at the first window, looked out at the wild field, and felt my heart calm down. He thinks I'll panic. That I'll fall apart. That I'll beg. But I didn't feel scared. I felt ready. I opened what used to be the kitchen door, and right away I could see time hadn't been kind to the place. Cabinet doors hung crooked or were missing entirely. A cracked mug sat on the counter, half covered in dust and mouse droppings. That's when I spotted it: cans. A small pile shoved into the corner, like someone had tried to hide them. Next to them, bottled water lined up on a shelf like little soldiers. That's when it hit me: he planned for me to stay here. Not just for a few hours, but long enough for him to do whatever he needed to get everything in his name. Long enough to make sure I was too tired, too isolated, or too broken to fight back. I stood there in that broken-down kitchen, and something inside me cracked open. Not from sadness, but from release. Like layers of silence and years of just going along with things were peeling off me, flaking away like old paint. All those times I smiled and nodded while he took the lead, while he handled things, believing that love could somehow excuse his lack of respect. I found a rusty can opener under the sink and opened a can of beans. They tasted like metal and dust, but I chewed each bite slowly, with purpose. I remembered the days when I'd bake bread from scratch, and the warm smell would fill my kitchen. Drawing him down the stairs as a little boy. That life? It felt like it belonged to another woman. When I finished eating, I wiped my hands on my skirt and stood up. I walked from room to room, checking the place out. In what I guessed had once been a bedroom, I found a moth-eaten blanket. In the cellar, there were more canned goods, a box of matches, and an old rusty lantern. I ran my fingers along the cool, damp stone walls down there. The texture, rough and marked with tiny scratches, felt like a language only I understood. A language of survival. Of patience. Of quiet strength. I didn't scream. I didn't curse his name. I didn't cry into the dust. I just stood there and took it all in. He wanted me to be helpless. But I was already planning, figuring out what I had, what I needed, and what I'd do next. He thought he was leaving me to rot. But what he really did was give me the space. I needed to remember exactly who I am. As the sun sank in the house filled with long, golden shadows, I looked through the broken windows and felt calm. That night, I didn't sleep much. I thought about my father, a wiry man with sunbrowned skin, a voice like gravel, and hands gentle enough to braid my hair before school. We didn't have much when I was little. Some nights, dinner was just potatoes and wild greens we picked from the roadside. But my father never let hard times make him bitter. He taught me how to sew up torn clothes, find clean water when the well ran dry, and set rabbit traps in the snow. After my husband died, all those lessons came flooding back. I didn't have time to fall apart. The bills came in like waves, one after another. I worked in the garden until my hands bled. I sold jars of homemade jam at the farmer's market just to keep the lights on. I used to think, once my son is grown, I can finally rest. I thought he'd carry the weight I'd carried for so long. That he'd honor the years I held everything together. But sitting there, feeling the cold floor beneath me, I had to face the truth. I had raised a man who valued comfort more than character. And that kind of loss? It isn't like death. It's worse. Because the person is still there, but everything you believed about them is gone. Still, as the hours passed, the heaviness inside me began to shift. It became something solid. Something hot. A quiet fire burning in my chest. I made myself a promise right there under that ragged blanket. I will not be buried by his betrayal. At dawn, I stood up. My joints ached, but I moved anyway. I caught a glimpse of myself in a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. My face looked thinner, more worn than I remembered. But behind the lines and shadows, I saw my father's strength staring back at me. "You're stronger than any betrayal," I whispered to my reflection, my breath fogging the glass. Then I stepped outside into the cool morning air. Dew clung to the tall grass like little silver shields. I crouched down and ran my fingers through the soil, just like I used to when checking if the garden was ready for planting. And right then, for the first time in years, I felt steady. My thoughts clicked into place like cans lined up on pantry shelves. What do I have? Who might help? How do I get home? I thought of my husband's voice, how he'd stand by the garden and say, "Nothing grows without patience, and nothing survives without a little fight." In that quiet light, I let go of the anger. I didn't forgive, but I saw things clearly. Now. I stood up tall, feeling the ground solid beneath my feet. Not just dirt under my shoes, but something deeper, like the land itself was reminding me, "You're not finished yet." This wasn't about money anymore. This was about taking back every part of myself that he tried to tear away. If he really believed he could erase me with an old farmhouse and a few dusty cans of beans, he was about to find out just who raised him. The next morning, I stepped outside just as the sun began to rise. The light spread slowly across the fields. Like someone had spilled a glass of milk. The wind was soft now, no longer harsh like the night before. It carried the fresh scent of wildflowers and damp earth instead of that awful, rotting smell. The farm felt huge, just open fields of green and brown stretching out forever. There wasn't a road in sight, or even another person. It was like the world had gone silent. Then something caught my eye. Just a glimmer, like sunlight bouncing off metal. I squinted. My heart skipped a beat. There, leaning over a rusty red tractor, was someone. A man. He moved slowly, stopping every few seconds to fiddle with something under the hood. I didn't think twice. My father used to say, "If you wait for the perfect moment, you'll be waiting forever." So I raised my hand and shouted, even though my voice was rough from days without talking. "Hello? Over here." At first, he didn't hear me. I shouted again, louder this time, my voice slicing through the quiet morning air. He finally looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead with a rag. He looked confused, unsure of what he was seeing. I walked toward him, my legs heavy but steady. When I reached the fence, I grabbed the wooden post to catch my breath. My chest burned from the effort. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked gently. His voice was tired, but kind. I nodded, though I felt like my legs might give out. "I need help," I said. "Please. I don't have a phone. Or keys. My son, he left me here." Saying it out loud felt strange, like I was telling someone else's story. He looked at me with quiet sympathy, then pulled an old flip phone from his back pocket. "Here," he said. "Call whoever you need." My hand shook as I took it. The phone was warm from being in his pocket. I just stood there for a moment, staring at the worn-out buttons, my blurry reflection in the screen. Then I dialed the only number that felt safe, Helen's. She'd been my best friend since we were kids. She knew every part of me, every secret, every scar. She picked up on the first ring. "Martha? Where in God's name are you?" "I've been worried sick." Her voice hit me like a hammer to glass. I held the phone tight, trying not to cry. Helen, I said quietly. He took everything. Left me on some old farm. I don't know exactly where I am, but I can see a red tractor. And a broken down barn. I heard her gasp, then the sound of her typing fast. Tell me everything. Right now. I glanced at the farmer. He pretended not to listen, but stayed close, like he was ready to catch me if I fell. I told her what I could, the weeds, the broken swing set, the crooked fence posts. She promised to call my lawyer and send someone to get me. When I handed the phone back to the farmer, something shifted inside me. It was small, but real, a little light pushing through the darkness. You can't stay out here, he said softly. I can draw you a map to the nearest bus stop if you feel up to walking, or I can drive you part way. I shook my head and lifted my chin. I'll walk, I said. I need to do this on my own. He nodded without saying a word. He understood. I tucked the hand-drawn map into my pocket and looked out across the fields. My knees were weak, but my heart was louder than ever. My son thought he could write the ending of my story. But today, I started writing my own. The map felt heavy in my pocket, like a little promise that I wasn't stuck anymore. I thanked the farmer again. He looked at me with the kind of respect I hadn't seen in a man's eyes for a long time. As I turned away from the fence, Helen's voice echoed in my mind, "Stay alive, Martha. Just keep moving. I'm coming for you." I whispered the words again and again as I stepped onto the dirt path. Each footstep felt like I was carrying the weight of all the years I had spent waiting, shrinking, believing someone else's idea of who I was. The sun climbed higher, warming my back, but I didn't stop. With every step, I stood a little taller. I passed old trees and dry fields. The earth buzzed quietly in the summer heat. And I thought about the day I taught my son how to walk. How? He stumbled, then looked back at me for help. Back then, I would have caught him every time he fell. Now? I was finally learning how to catch myself. This time, I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I walked away from him, and I kept walking. It felt like forever, but I finally reached the bus stop. It was just an old wooden bench, paint peeling off, with a faded bus schedule nailed to a post. My legs gave out, and I sank down, breathing hard. Sweat stung my eyes, and my whole body ached. I looked around, hoping to see someone, anyone. That's when I noticed her. A young woman, probably headed into town. She had headphones in and was focused on her phone. I cleared my throat and spoke as gently as I could. "Excuse me? Can I borrow your phone? Just one last call." She jumped a little, surprised. Then she looked up and really saw me, the dirt on my clothes, the tiredness on my face. For a second, she hesitated. But then she silently handed over her phone. I called Helen. She picked up so quickly, it felt like she'd been sitting there with the phone pressed to her heart, just waiting. "Martha? Are you okay? Where are you?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I made it to the bus stop. I'm safe, for now. Please, tell the lawyer to move fast." Helen's voice shook. "I already did. He's preparing documents to freeze your son's access to your money. I also talked to the sheriff, they're ready to step in if you want to press charges." Something inside me clicked into place, like a broken bone finally healing. "Helen," I said, my voice calm but strong, "we're not just freezing his access. We're taking everything back. Every paper. Every signature. Every bit of respect he tried to steal from me." She went quiet for a second, then I heard her say, "That's my girl." And for the first time since my husband died, I felt like myself again, not just someone's mother, or someone's widow, but a woman. Whole. Unshakable, I gave the phone back to the girl. She looked at me with wide eyes, careful, but kind. "Thank you," I said. She nodded. In her look, I saw something I hadn't seen in my son's eyes for years. Basic human decency. I sat up straight on that cracked bench, my back aching. But proud. I wasn't waiting for someone to save me, I was waiting for my chance to strike back. This time, I wouldn't do it quietly. The world around me felt still, like even the wind had paused to watch. I stared down the road. Dust danced through the air. I thought about everything I had lost, and everything I still had left. I reached into my pocket and touched the farmer's map. Its edges were worn from my fingers. That scrap of paper reminded me that someone out there had offered me kindness when I needed it most. I thought of Helen's voice, shaky but fierce. I thought of the lawyer's calm hands as he prepared the documents. And I thought of my husband's words, whispered years ago and buried deep in my memory, "Don't let them write your ending." A bus finally creaked up to the stop. The driver barely looked at me as I climbed on. My shoes left a trail of dust on the metal floor. I slid into a seat near the back and watched the fields roll by, houses, mailboxes leaning sideways, patches of wildflowers. Every mile felt like a stitch, slowly closing a wound that had been open for far too long. When I got off in town, the hot pavement burned through my thin shoes. I pulled my shoulders back and walked toward the law office where Helen and the lawyer would be waiting. I passed the flower shop where I used to buy roses for my husband every year on our anniversary. I passed the diner where my son once took me for Mother's Day, back when he still called me Mama instead of the old woman. And then I stood in front of the law office door. My hand hovered above the handle. I took a deep breath. I could feel all the pain I'd been carrying settle into something tougher, like armor. When I pushed open the door, Helen was already there. Her eyes met mine, glassy with tears. She looked like she might break, but I shook my head. "Not now," I whispered. "We don't cry today." She nodded, biting her lip, and then she pulled me into a short, tight hug. It wasn't soft or gentle, it was solid. Strong. Like a promise. The lawyer stood up behind his desk, a stack of papers already waiting for me. "Martha," he said, voice steady and respectful, "we're ready. We've frozen every account under your name. Here's the paperwork to revoke his power of attorney and start the fraud claims." I felt heat rise in my chest, not from anger, but power. "And the house?" I asked. "We've filed for a temporary restraining order. He won't be allowed back on the property until everything's sorted out legally." I nodded, slow and sure. This wasn't just the start of something new. This was the day I took everything back. I nodded slowly, each word I'd spoken feeling like a stone I was laying down, building something solid beneath my feet. I closed my eyes for a second and pictured my son's face when he realized I wasn't just alive, I was stronger than he ever thought I could be. The mother he tried to erase was back. And this time, I had the law behind me, and something even more powerful, my own will, unshakable and burning like fire. I opened my eyes and met Helen's steady gaze. "This is my line in the sand," I told her. "From today on, no one takes from me what I've built. No one." She squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt, but I didn't pull away. That pain grounded me. I turned to the lawyer and signed every single paper with a clear, steady hand. With each signature, the old version of me, the quiet, accommodating woman who kept the peace at any cost, crumbled like dry leaves in the wind. When I finally put the pen down, I let out a breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. It felt like it had been stuck inside me for decades. This wasn't just about taking my name off a bank account. This was about taking back every scrap of dignity he thought he could buy, trade, or toss aside. And right then, in that sunlit little office, I made myself a promise: never again would I let someone else decide what I was worth. When I stepped back outside, the sunlight felt different, sharper, almost electric. Helen came with me, clutching her purse like it was the only thing keeping her steady. "Are you sure you're okay to go alone?" she asked, her voice tight. I turned and smiled. Not a shaky smile, but a real one, quiet and strong. "I wasn't okay for a long time," I said. "But now? I'm more than okay. I'm ready." She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but I shook my head. "You saved me, Helen. You pulled me out of the dark. But I need to do the next part alone." She nodded slowly, lips pressed tight like she was swallowing a wave of words. I pulled my cardigan tighter around me and started walking down the sidewalk. And with every step, I felt the earth beneath me like a heartbeat, a steady rhythm reminding me that I was alive. Not just surviving anymore. Living. Finally, living. I passed the town square. I passed the church where I used to pray for my son's happiness. I walked past the park bench where I used to sit and watch him play as a little boy. All those places that once felt warm and full of love now seemed like old photos, faded memories of a person I thought he was, but never really knew. I stopped at a convenience store and bought a bottle of water. The young cashier gave me a curious look, probably noticing the dirt still on my shoes, the sweat dried along my temples. I handed him a bill and met his gaze. "Keep the change," I said, and it felt good, like choosing, like taking control of even the smallest thing. Back outside, I spotted her again, the young woman from the bus stop, the one who had lent me her phone. She was waiting on the bench, same as before. Our eyes met, and she gave me a cautious smile. I walked over and lifted my chin a little. "Thank you for earlier," I said. "I needed that kindness more than you know." She opened her mouth, paused, then looked me over. "You look different today." I almost laughed. It came from somewhere deep and sharp. "I am," I said simply. I asked to borrow her phone one more time. She handed it to me without a second thought this time. I called Helen again. She answered in a rush. "Martha? Are you okay? Where are you?" I closed my eyes, soaking in the sunlight on my face. "I just wanted to hear your voice one more time before I do this," I said. "I'm about to take my life back. Completely." Helen didn't say anything for a moment. I could picture her standing at her kitchen window, wringing a dish towel, her heart racing. "Be careful," she whispered. "I will," I promised. I gave the phone back to the woman, who nodded, her face soft with understanding. Then I sat down on the bench, my hands calm in my lap. But this wasn't like before. This wasn't the hollow, hopeless waiting of a woman left behind. This was focused. This was the kind of waiting that comes right before something big. I pictured my son in his comfortable house, sipping his morning coffee, thinking he was still in control. He had no idea that the world he built on my back was about to crack wide open. I walked the last few blocks to his house, my steps firm and sure. I didn't feel fear anymore. I'd burned that away. I stood in the yard for a moment, just taking it in, the neat hedges I'd once paid for, the welcome mat I'd bought for them as a housewarming gift. I pulled on a pair of gardening gloves. Old habit. No prints. I already knew where he kept the spare key. Third potted plant on the porch, tucked right underneath. He thought only he and his wife knew that little trick. But he forgot who raised him. And now? I was done being forgotten. I once saw him put it there, his hands shaky, like a kid sneaking a cookie when no one's looking. That memory stuck with me. So, when the time came, I slipped the key in the door and stepped inside without making a sound. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Those pricey candles he always said were too fancy for my old farmhouse. The whole house felt cold, like it didn't belong to anyone. It didn't feel like home, it felt like a set from a show. But instead of feeling sad, my heart just went hard. I knew exactly why I was there. I moved fast. Straight to his office, the one he always kept locked whenever I came over. But I knew the code. Of course I did. It was his birthday. The one I spent 36 painful hours in labor to bring him into this world. I earned every number in that code. Inside, I found everything. Cash stashed in the bottom drawer. Fake documents, fake signatures, and bank statements meant to make it look like I gave everything away on purpose. Lies. All of it. I grabbed every piece and stuffed them into the canvas bag, the same one he tossed at my feet the day he left. Me alone at that farmhouse. When I was done, I stood there for a minute, just breathing in the silence. Then I walked into his bedroom. Empty. He was probably out, celebrating what he thought was a win. I reached into my cardigan and pulled out the single rose I brought with me. I placed it gently on his nightstand. Then, I left as quietly as I came, locking the door and putting the key back under the flower pot. Outside, the air felt different. Crisp, almost electric. I took a deep breath. It tasted like freedom. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I walked slow and steady, like a woman who had nothing left to lose, and everything to take back. I thought about that rose waiting for him. In the dark. A small, silent truth blooming right where he'd never expect it. That night, I didn't just take back some papers or money. I took back me, the real me, the one he tried to erase. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Sitting by Helen's window, I watched the gray sky slowly turn gold. Today was the final step. The day I stopped being the quiet, forgotten mother and became someone who stood her ground, even if it hurt. Helen drove me to the courthouse. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight, I thought it might snap. She kept glancing at me, eyes full of tears, but I stayed quiet, just staring straight ahead. When we arrived, the courthouse steps looked like a mountain I'd been climbing my whole life. I got out of the car and wrapped my cardigan around me. Helen followed close behind, holding the thick folder full of proof. Inside, people turned to look. Some curious, some didn't care. To them, I was just some older woman in a sweater. But inside? Inside, I was thunder. We didn't wait long. My lawyer met us in the hallway. Calm face, serious eyes. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. I was born ready. I just didn't know it till now. We walked into a small conference room. My chest felt tight, but I held my head high. Halfway through showing the documents to the clerk, the door slammed open. He burst in, my son. Face red, hair a mess, like he'd run straight from the car. He stopped cold when he saw me, eyes bouncing between my face, the folder in Helen's arms, and the lawyer at my side. "Mama, what is this? What are you doing?" he asked, stumbling over his words. I looked right at him. "Really?" I said. I didn't see the baby I rocked or the teen I defended at school meetings. I saw a grown man hollowed out by greed. "I'm taking back what's mine," I told him. "All of it." He stepped forward, his voice rising. "You don't get it. This was supposed to be for us. I was protecting you." I laughed. A cold, sharp laugh. By leaving me with nothing but a rotting porch and a few cans of beans? By forging my name and lying to everyone? I said. His face twisted. "It's not what you think. Please, just let me explain." But my lawyer stepped between us. "Sir, you need to leave. You've been served. No contact. Effective immediately." His eyes widened. He lunged like he might grab the folder, but security was already on him. 2 guards pulled him back. As they dragged him away, he screamed through the halls, his voice echoing off the walls. You can't do this to me. You owe me. I'm your son. You're ruining everything. I just stood there, watching him. His voice cracked, heavy with panic and guilt. He was flailing, desperate, angry, scared. But I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't even feel sad. I felt calm, clear, and finally done. I turned to Helen and my lawyer. Let's finish this, I said simply. As the guards pulled him from the room, I looked at him one last time. Not with love. Not with hate. Just a quiet kind of pity, the kind you feel for someone who had every chance to do better but chose not to. He had chosen greed. I had chosen myself. And for the first time in a very long time, that choice felt exactly right. When the door closed behind him, the room went still. It was that thick, humming silence that comes right after a storm. I sat down again, my palms flat on the table like I needed to ground myself. Helen pushed the folder toward the lawyer, her hands shaking a little as she did. He glanced up at me. We're ready to finalize everything. Once you sign, he'll have no legal right to any of your property or money. I nodded, breathing slowly and deeply. Just as I reached for the pen, the door opened again, this time gently, like someone afraid to be seen. It was my daughter-in-law. Her eyes were red from crying. Her lips trembled like she'd practiced a speech but forgot the words. Please, can I talk to you? She asked, her voice soft. I looked at her. The same woman who once laughed behind my back, called me old-fashioned, rolled her eyes at my garden and my simple life. Now she stood there like a lost child. You've got 5 minutes, I said, my voice sharp enough to chill the air. She stepped forward, wringing her hands. He made mistakes. We all did. But this is too much. You're breaking the family apart. I laughed. A dry, bitter sound that didn't even feel like mine. Family? I asked. You mean the same family that left me to rot on a broken porch? The one that forged my name and stole my home, all while pretending it was for my own good? Her face crumpled. We didn't know he'd go that far. We thought you were fragile. We thought you needed him. I leaned in, my voice low but sharp like a knife. I never needed him. I needed respect. And all of you failed to give it. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the table like she might touch mine. I pulled my hands back. You only miss me now that I said no, I whispered. She froze. The words hit her like ice water. Her mouth twisted, somewhere between a sob and a snarl. You think this makes you strong? Ruining your own son's future, she spat. I sat up straighter and looked her dead in the eye. I'm not ruining his future. He did that himself. And you helped him every step of the way. She stumbled back like the truth had knocked the wind out of her. Her shoulders sank, and for the first time, I saw her not as cruel, but as someone who had spent years avoiding the truth. Then Helen spoke. Her voice calm and clear. She gave everything. And he chose to take it all, and more. This isn't punishment. This is survival. My daughter-in-law turned and rushed out, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. I didn't watch her go. I didn't blink. The lawyer cleared his throat gently. Are you ready to sign now, Mrs. Lane? I nodded. This time, my hands were steady. I picked up the pen and pressed it to the paper, each signature smooth and sure. I wasn't just signing legal documents, I was signing my name back into my own life. For the first time in decades, I felt like myself again. When I finished, I set the pen down and let out a long, full breath. It's done, I said. Helen reached across the table and gripped my hand tight. Her eyes shimmered, and she didn't even try to hide her tears. There was fire in her grip, a fierce kind of pride. It matched the fire I felt growing inside me. Let my son's wife tell her own version of this day. Let her say I was cruel, heartless, cold. I didn't care. Because, finally, I was writing my own story. And I was just getting started. You called me a burden, I said, my voice steady. Told me I was in the way. But look at me now, standing strong. And you? You're the one being dragged in by guards. His face turned red, veins popping at his neck. You don't understand, he growled. You're ruining everything. I was going to fix it. I was going to fix it all. I laughed. Cold. Empty. You think betrayal is something you can patch up like a leaky faucet? I asked. You think love is something you pawn when life gets hard? No, you never planned to fix anything. You just wanted to own me. The courtroom was quiet. You could hear his shaky breathing. Everyone was watching. You told people. I was weak, I said, not backing down. Said I couldn't take care of myself. But really? You were scared. Scared of what would happen if I woke up. Scared I'd remember that I built this life long before you could even walk. He lunged forward, spitting out his anger. You owe me. You wouldn't have anything without me. You're nothing without your family. 2 guards grabbed him. Before he could get any closer, he fought them, his voice cracking, tears spilling. But I didn't flinch. I took one slow, solid step forward. I am not yours to own, I said, clear as glass. I was never your servant. Never your wallet. Never your shield. I gave you everything because I thought love meant sacrifice. But love without respect? That's not love at all. His screams turned into sobs. His body sagged between the guards, too tired to fight anymore. I turned to the judge, the clerks, everyone in that room. He doesn't get to define me anymore. I said, my voice strong and sure. Not today. Not ever again. The judge gave a quiet nod, her eyes thoughtful. Then she motioned to the guards, and they let him out. His sobs echoed down the hallway until the doors shut behind him. As soon as the sound faded, I felt it, my shoulders dropping, the tension in my body melting like ice in the sun. For the first time in years, I could breathe. Helen reached out and squeezed my arm. Her eyes sparkled, full of pride and something like love. My lawyer handed me the final stamped papers, proof that everything he tried to take was mine again. Without question. I stepped outside. The sun hit my face, warm and golden. It felt new. Like a fresh start. Like a second chance at life. I thought about all the years I stayed quiet. All the times I bent myself into small shapes just to keep the peace. Not anymore. From this day forward, I would never give up my dignity just to make someone else comfortable. And as the courthouse doors shut behind me, I whispered to the wind, quiet doesn't mean weak.